going to reconvene the regular meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. This is Thursday, March 12th, 2020. And Council, would you announce any action that might have been taken in closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair, members of the board and public. The first item that was discussed was the conference with legal counsel, Fort Ord Reuse Authority versus all persons interested in the matter of the issuance and sale of bonds. Pleased to report that Judge Villarreal this morning granted FORA's application for validation and entered a judgment for validation of the bond issuance and the payment of a tax increment stream that will repay the bonds. So that happened and was a favorable development, so we'll be going forward with our bond issuance project. The next item was conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9D2, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation. There was one potential case discussed and nothing to report out. And finally, conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A D1, Resource Environmental, Inc. versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, case number 20CV771. That's a matter of pending litigation. The board heard from counsel on that matter, and there's nothing to report out.
Thank you. We will move now to acknowledgements, announcements, and correspondence. Mr. Metz.
Thank you, Chair, and board members and members of the public. There's a number of items here to mention. By way of announcement, we are working closely with MCP, Marina Community Partners, on their effort to begin demolition of the barracks on the hill behind our office here that should begin in the next week or so, hopefully. So that will be a major high-profile project that will accomplish a long dreamed of step in the reuse process. Also, we have received, and you have received, a number of correspondence to the board since the last meeting. Those include a letter from Mr. Peter Lee regarding Pure Water Monterey proposed expansion, a letter from Landwatch regarding HCP EIR considerations, including a letter from Professor Fred Watson from CSUMB. And as of today, I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This one here from Jack Stewart, letters from the veterans community in regards to their request for funding post-FORA. And those are all included in a binder that's printed here and accessible online. I will note that from today, FORA's sunset will happen in 110 days. And to date, we have held 27 noticed board and committee meetings since January 1st. It's in about 10 weeks. And we'll likely continue on that pace at least until some major decisions are made. So I just want to give props to you all for participating, but perhaps most importantly our staff, our remaining staff, and our team of consultants that are working hard to support all of that information and noticing. And just a couple additional items you might have noticed in the lobby. We have begun instituting some measures to protect the safety and well-being of our staff and visitors in these unusual times. And so we just ask that you respect those protocols, and when you expect to come to meetings, there'll be, we're just trying to contain the public moving around the office as much. And to the, finally, to the question about reviewing our call-in procedures for future meetings and all of that, I wouldn't let you know about the governor's office today released Executive Order N25-20, which establishes certain new protocols related to the Brown Act and the Bagley-Keene Act for conducting public meetings. significantly enhancing our ability to provide for people to self-quarantine and shelter in place and access to conduct these meetings. So I have a copy of it here. We've also put it out on social media, and we'll send it around for your information. It's worth reviewing, quite flexible and appropriate under these conditions. So we'll be sending out information about how to access all of that. I think a lot of that will be using Zoom technology that we have access to. Probably all of you or many of you are familiar with. We'll provide video guidance for people that might need to get up to speed on how to use it. And there is still a requirement to provide for public a single location where one publicly accessible location from which members of the public shall have the right to observe and offer public comment at a meeting, even though all the members need not be present in that physical location. So we'll see how we can set that up probably in the FORA office. So anyhow, that's the acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence for today. Thank you.
And questions?
We will be working, we can begin instituting that pretty much immediately. I think tomorrow we've got a meeting here, so we'll probably go ahead with that. I think the wave is coming our way, so we've got a few more days to get organized.
And one further question, I know I did see this, but I didn't read it that closely. We don't need to tell you the location where we're calling from.
I could read it if it would be helpful.
No, I just wanted to make sure, so it's even as a last minute, somebody doesn't feel well.
Yes, so
somebody decides they want to use a call-in, it's not necessary that it's on the agenda that's published in advance.
Yeah, so
trying to verify that.
That's true.
That we all understand
they
that.
suspend a number of those key requirements, and
Thank you very
there's
much.
about 6 of them that are identified here that are hereby suspended, and then there's just a couple caveats to how we would need to accommodate making sure the public can still engage. But to your point, no, we're not. Tomorrow we're going to be here.
Tomorrow morning.
Next Friday, yes, a week from tomorrow. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other questions about the announcements, Dr. Ochoa?
I was wondering if I could make an announcement of my own.
I think that's probably all right. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to let you know that CSUMB is going to be suspending all classes starting tomorrow for a period of 4 days until March 19. And then we will resume classes on March 20th through April 24th using what we call alternative delivery methods. Which involves things like Zoom and other types of technology. We're also canceling all campus visits and tours for that same period, March 13 to April 24th. We're canceling university-sponsored attendance at any off-campus event of 250 participants or more. We're canceling all on-campus events of more than 50 participants, and any on-campus events of less than 50 participants will require prior approval by the appropriate university vice president. Most campus services will remain operational, including housing, computer labs, food service, counseling service, and other aspects of university life. By April 15, we will reassess the situation, including plans for commencement. And lastly, and most regretfully, I have to report that we have decided to postpone the gala that was scheduled for this Saturday, given the new guidelines from the California Public Health Department.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from board members on the announcements? All right, thank you. We'll move now to roll call, please.
Supervisor Parker?
Here?
Supervisor Phillips? Here. Supervisor Adams? Here. Councilmember Gagliotti? Here. Councilmember O'Connell? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Morton? Here. Councilmember Hoffa? Mayor Oglesby? Here. Councilmember Wizard? Here. Mayor Carbone? Mayor Gunter? Councilmember Garfield? Here. Councilmember Reimers?
Here.
You have a quorum?
Thank you. We'll move now to the consent agenda. Any board members wishing to pull any items for discussion, questions, or comment? I'm actually going to pull 7G for a comment. Any member of the public wishing to pull any item from the consent agenda? The issue, no, not yet. That'll be a.
That's 8A.
Yeah, thank you. D, 7D. Okay, thank you. Great. Anyone else? All right, Mr. Williams, let's hear from you on 7D.
Okay, thank you. Most of you in here know who I am, Sid Williams. I am a member of the VIAC committee who sent you this letter, and I just wanted to take a moment to, first of all, to thank the board of FORA, present and past, for all the help that you have provided to the veterans community. I can guarantee you that we would not be where we are today with the Veterans Cemetery without FORA's help along the way, and we really appreciate that. I want to make you aware of this letter that is in your consent agenda today. It's not an action item. You're just going to talk about it a bit. But it's important to understand that VIAC submitted this letter. This is your committee of VIAC. They submitted this letter to ask you to look at helping the county accept the responsibilities that VIAC has carried out for all these years, to help the veterans community, to be ombudsman for the veterans community, to reach out to local government, state government, federal government, to watch over regulatory and statutory changes that might affect what we're trying to do out here. So when it comes back for your consideration on a future agenda, I'll be here again to talk. But if you have questions about what FORA has done, what FORA could do, what the veterans community, your VIAC community would like for you to do, your staff has all of the information of how to reach me by phone, by email, by text, by Lord knows what else. So I thank you for the time to speak about this. Please read that letter carefully. Please reach out for information if there's something you don't understand. So when it comes before you, we have a chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any board member comments or questions on item 7D?
Thanks, Chair. I was going to speak to it a little bit later, but seems as though it was pulled, and so we can talk about it right now. I want to be clear. This is an action item. If you read the consent agenda, it's information/action, and if you know anything about committees, my letter has in there a recommendation for action. We received other letters that went along with it. That's up to you to adjust the monetary request that's in there, but my letter's pretty clear. I'm asking you guys to take actions to support the Veterans Advisory Committee and ask the county to move it forward. The concern is, how do we get a liaison empowered to the county? We can't make the county do anything. All the FORA board can do is ask the county to put a liaison in the budget, and then that's for the county to do. But I'm asking this board to move that recommendation to ask the county to do that. And then I think the second point is also for to budget the first year for that cost. It says defray the cost, because I'm not looking for a full position. It's just someone to liaison and keep the meetings going and to work with that committee. And then I know FORA doesn't have a lot of money, so whatever the FORA board through the finance committee can do, that's what we're asking for. But to keep delaying it, like we're going to automatically come up with enough money to actually fund one position, I don't think we have that. So it's just more of a straight question to send a letter to the Board of Supervisors asking them to make way for a liaison within their budgeting constraints that they have. Thank the chair.
Thank you. Could staff clarify when that request is going to be considered and how?
This is a recommendation from the committee, and we do have on the schedule to bring the mid-year budget, the first meeting in May. So this item could be considered then, or you could choose to do something different here today. But the standard calendar would have this be part of the mid-year budget process.
Yes, Director Morton, and then Director Adams, did you have a question?
So to Josh's statement that this would be part of the mid-year budget, I do note that the agenda, with all respect to the speaker and to Ian, is that it's on the agenda as receive a report. So I don't think we can do anything other than receive the report today. But I do, should it go in front of the Finance Committee? I mean, there's so many people, so many interests, so many jurisdictions, so many things that, taking it to the Finance Committee, if you have $10, we need to figure out where the $10 is going to go. And to start with the Finance Committee and then have that come forward so we know what everybody's claim on that $10 is, makes us much more effective. And that, I'm not diminishing the interest of the veterans at all. They should be considered in this, but it's a process.
Director Adams?
So I wanted to see if you could tell me about possibilities. If we were to approve this either today or at some later point, my expectation is that people have already spoken to Jason at the Veterans Affairs Office, and that he would be, I would think under the county, he would be the right department for this to be nested. Is there any sort of procedure or process where FORA could like endow an additional amount, not just 1 year, but more than 1 year, to be able to fund either a position or a part of a position that would last for more like 10 years? I say that knowing exactly how the county's budget is and what the county's budget is looking like every day, that we have more people stationed at Asilomar and watching the hotels empty and the people go away. And I feel like this is going to be a concern that I have. I want to see it get funded, but I'm just wondering if there is any kind of possibility of having FORA designate a bigger amount of money that could go to the county as an endowment of sorts to fund this kind of position. Is that humanly possible or legally possible?
Well, I think to what Member Morton said, it'd probably be a topic to bring up through the Finance Committee and get into all of the detailed discussions about the totality of available funds that you have to work with and funding mechanisms if there are alternatives.
So there may be a funding mechanism that will allow for that kind of
There, I would say, I'm not in a position to say affirmatively if there is another mechanism at this moment.
Right, so I guess let's just lay out the process here. So it sounds like what's being recommended is that this request and the augmented request, as well as any other requests for remaining FORA funds, be put in writing to the Finance Committee, and the Finance Committee is going to meet before the board meeting where we are going to be looking at the budget and the CIP.
Yeah, March 23rd, 11 o'clock is the next Finance Committee meeting.
Okay.
Probably be some remote options for that one.
Great. Director Garfield and then Director Oglesby.
I pass.
Yeah, I think I'll be fairly quickly. Again, just very simply for me, this is on the consent agenda, meaning it should not be controversial, but it could be. But that doesn't mean you can't take action. So someone pulled it off, so now we're talking about it. And Josh is up to speed on our request. You know, he's the one that made sure we want to send money over to the county, to be clear. That's why we're asking FORA to send money. And I know FORA doesn't have a lot of money, or I can say FORA doesn't have any money. So but my point is, I want the FORA board to ask the county. And I know the county may say they don't have it, but how do we get the question to the county? That's all this is. How do we officially ask them to look at this and support the veterans, which I know they do, but I know we all have money constraints. So if you guys want to send it back to finance, that's fine, but I just don't want to make a big deal about the expectations. We're not putting a lot of expectations other than, at the end of the day, is there money to help the county look at this position, because the county says they don't have the money. That's all.
Director Gagliotti.
Yeah, so similar to another consent item that's on here, where there's a promise of a certain amount, the pending review by the mid-year budget, can we amend basically then this consent item with the same language or similar language?
So I think I'll ask council to weigh in, but it's my impression, my understanding that the 7D is receiving a report which includes a recommendation for funding. We are not approving any funding today, and through the discussion, it is known that this request will be, I think it is in writing already, so it can go to the Finance Committee and will be considered along with other requests.
That's correct.
Okay, great. So I think that's been a helpful discussion. Thank you. Good. Moving now to, we'll vote on the entire consent, I hope, once we get done with 7G now, which is the one that I pulled. And this one, I wanted to, and I note that this is a shift in escrow holder for monies that this board has previously committed to South Boundary Road and the intersection of General Jim Moore Road and South Boundary Road. And it also says in the materials that we're going to make this escrow change, and the you know, it's just sort of setting up the documentation so that then the commitment that has been made can be carried out when we take the actions on the CIP and on the budget. And I would like to request that a couple of other commitments that this board has made, I'd like to also have us have the paperwork ready when the item comes to us when we're looking at the budget and the CIP. We need to also take care of the $2 million for Marina Stockade project that we have committed, and the Eucalyptus Road drainage fix, where we agreed to allocate $1 million. So I understand my staff was communicating with FORA staff that the money is there for these commitments, so I would ask that at our next meeting when we're talking about the budget and the CIP that we have the documents we need to take the action to secure those funds for Seaside and Marina, and just in the form of direction to staff.
Yes, thank you for that direction. That has been our intention. We have been working hard. Our controller and our support consultants to kind of dive into the details of the CIP budget over the last couple of months. It hasn't been a simple task, but they are making headway. And so our intention all along has been to bring first the mid-year budget and then the CIP items to accomplish those fund transfers in the month of April.
Thank you. Director Morton?
Follow-up question, Josh. So I do understand this isn't going into an escrow, and I do understand, because I talked with Helen, our finance director, earlier this morning, there are adequate funds for the Eucalyptus Road commitment, the Stockade commitment, and this $8.3 million commitment. So by putting this into escrow, we're not having to think about we may have inadequate funds and may have to claw back portions of money for Eucalyptus or the Stockade?
Yeah, that's my understanding. So what, the first piece here, I described it as two different tranches of monies. The first was the 5 million for South Boundary Road and the 1.056168 million for the General Jim Moore South Boundary Road intersection that was approved and funds verified at the May 10th, 2019 meeting. And then the 2.269813 were approved subject to the confirmation of the CFD revenues, which would happen at the mid-year budget. So that's where that caveat is placed on that particular amount. But once the name change for the first tranche is done, those funds can be moved.
So the action today would be to move the 5 million plus the 1.056 million into escrow immediately.
It would give us the ability to change the name on the attached.
It's changing the escrow company.
Yes.
It's not changing a name. It's transferred to a different entity.
Right.
And then the additional allocation of 2.269 million, that would come up in the mid-year budget review?
What I'm just whispered here is the transfer of funds happens after you all do the mid-year budget. That's what Helen just said. So my understanding is all of this is here. Everything that we've talked about so far is with regards to the budget. These funds are here. The funds for Eucalyptus Road are there. The funds for the stockade are there. And once the mid-year budget comes through here, Helen's going to sign all the transfer documents.
It's going to be re-verified there's adequate funds after the mid-year budget.
That is correct.
Thank you.
We don't want anyone to transfer any funds until such time as we absolutely secure the budget first. And then at that point in time, then we'll release the funds so that you're aware of what potential funds that are available would be subsequent to the budget.
Right. Thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you. So if people are ready, I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Second?
Thank you. A motion by Phillips, seconded by Adams. Any further discussion? Do I need to ask for public comment on this? I don't think so. Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we will move now to our business items. First is Habitat Conservation Plan, EIR options, second vote. You want to set that up? Or?
Yeah, so Kendall Flint is going to step us through the slide deck to remind you of the options that you voted on before and what's in front of you, and then the vote will proceed.
Okay, thank you, Josh. This is basically from your special board meeting of, I believe it was the 21st of February, at which time you considered additional funding to complete the environmental impact report, the final environmental impact report for the Habitat Conservation Plan. The board considered 5 options. The first was to go ahead and prepare an environmental impact report, potentially certify it, and also adopt the Habitat Conservation Plan. The second option was to prepare and possibly certify the EIR with no project alternative, meaning you say there's no project being adopted, and do not adopt the HCP. A third option was to prepare and certify the EIR with revised project amendments, meaning that it would be a change with basically phasing the development or changing the development footprint. It also included do not adopt the HCP. And then the other option was for the FORA board to not complete the EIR, but instead to consider a later date providing funds to the Joint Powers Authority for it to move forward. I believe that after a friendly amendment, I think we were at number C, which was basically prepare the environmental impact report with new alternatives, which would reflect again some of the things that we've heard out of the Habitat working group, and not to adopt the Habitat Conservation Plan. And I believe that we went on this one as an 8-4 vote in favor at that time. And then I think we had some other discussion about it. So with that, I would turn it back to the chair. And
Thank you. Any board member questions or comments at this point? Director Adams?
Thank you. I remember having a difficult time with this item when we voted on it before because I didn't feel like I had a thorough enough information. But what I also realized at that time that we didn't have the opportunity to ask our executive officer what his perspective was on this. And I would really value it if I could just ask the question of the executive officer, from what you've been doing with this, what do you think is the best way to go? Maybe I should try to word it a different way, but I mean, truthfully, for all of us, I mean, he's the one that's been working on this, continually. If it doesn't feel uncomfortable, just to share your insight.
Well, I can tell you that we have been spending a lot of time on it, both at the staff level and the consultant level, and at with the Habitat Working Group. There's been a number of discussions. This is a issue where there's many unknowns, and it's complicated even for people who deal with it every day. There's some nuances, and so where I have my frame of reference on this is both in looking at the mission that FORA has to achieve a balanced reuse here at Fort Ord, and also to get us to a smooth transition in about 100 days. So, that has left me with a perspective that, continuing on this path requires a significant amount of time and effort, additional money to be invested in an uncertain future. As Kendall's reported before, we look back at the history of the work that's been done here with this board since about 2007. There's been multiple times where the assurance has been provided that this EIR could be completed, would be done in a short amount of time, the HCP along with that. Those are all still uncertain, I think, under these conditions. I think it, as been discussed before, there are some potentially increased legal and litigation risks, and I think the benefits are somewhat unclear. So if I was asked, where my recommendation would be, it would be to encourage the formation of a joint powers authority to take this on. And basically, from the report that we got from the Department of Fish and Wildlife today, they are agnostic as to whether the lead agency is the Fort Ord Reuse Authority or the Habitat Joint Powers Authority. So you could simply convey this work like we're conveying our transportation projects, our CIP projects, and all of that to this Joint Powers Authority, and they could refine the documents and complete the work, and which would allow us to smoothly transition the agency and get that done within 100 days. So that would be my recommendation.
I thank you really very much for that. I appreciate.
Thank you. Director Wizard?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, because I'm not privy to all of the conversations at the Habitat Working Group meetings and the conversations the executive officers had with our state and federal partners, I appreciate that California and federal departments of Fish and Wildlife are indifferent as to whether it's a JPA or FORA that is the lead agency. Given that we are where we are today with FORA having done one of two votes to become the lead agency that certifies the EIR, is there a practical difference in us voting today and FORA being the lead agency versus voting it down and potentially a JPA taking it up to be the lead agency at some date in the future? Is there any programmatic or legal difference between those two things?
Yeah, I mean, the main issue before you, which you voted on before, was whether or not we were going to direct staff to contract an additional $200,000+ for additional consultant work to attempt to respond to the 33 comment letters about the EIR, incorporate the new alternative, and publish a final EIR within 110 days. So that's what's really being voted on here. As far as taking additional action to empower the JPA, say providing funds from the habitat conservation set aside that's been held back, the 30% of CFD funds to the amount of $17 million, a portion of which has been deemed by a council to be suitable for use in additional studies, to a successor agency on the habitat obligations that FORA has. That would be a subsequent action that the board could take.
Through the chair. I guess I was verbose and not sufficiently clear. Is there a difference between us hypothetically voting yes now and FORA preparing that work as compared with us voting no now and a JPA doing that work beginning July 1st? Is the end result for Fish and Game, federal or state, any different, regardless of whose name is on it?
You're asking in terms of actually a document that is submitted to them for consideration, or as
right,
the certified?
Because we heard some comments about how Fish and Game doesn't care who's the lead agency. So I'm wondering, because we're at the place now where we have a second vote in front of us,
right.
Is there if we say yes, is there a difference than a JPA saying yes in 110 days? And if we say no, is there any benefit to the JPA saying yes in 110 days?
Well, the benefit, the one benefit, the two benefits that I can see from my position is that increases our likelihood of a smooth transition and being able to get our work done, and second, that the JPA would have the opportunity to take on revision work that might be beneficial to a more successful, less litigious outcome on this issue. And I think Kendall has some additional comments if you'd be willing to hear those.
I want to keep that brief because I think what you're basically asking is, what's the difference in terms of litigation if it's FORA or if it's the JPA? And the answer is that if FORA moves forward with the completion of the EIR and certification, then FORA would be the agency that would be subject in the short term to whether it's frivolous litigation or not litigation. If it goes to the JPA, then likewise the JPA would take that on. One of the things that we've discussed internally is that if the JPA takes it on, it would have an opportunity to revisit the habitat conservation plan and amend that document so it was more in keeping with the current development projections that are moving forward. From the federal and state agencies, they don't care which one of them does it. And I think from certain agencies out there, they also don't care. They'll be throwing paper at either at this point. But the question is, in the short term, with the time we have left, not moving forward means that there's no chance for litigation, but the downside, there's no certified EIR. The upside, if you do move forward with this action, then you have the potential for litigation with a short time frame before we go to sunset.
Director Gagliotti and then Director Garfield.
Yeah, that we're assuming that there's going to be a JPA. I mean, I kind of take pause at that, Josh, just to say that, well, we'll just kick it down the road and that we're going to have a JPA. I mean, in the last meeting, the temperature in the room was that we're not going to have a JPA. And if we're going to finish anything as this board as we close down, we all had basically agreement last time we were together that we would at least finish the EIR and then basically call it a day. So, I mean, I don't see any in your recommendation to just not do anything now and then kick it to a JPA that doesn't happen. Then it's just we've done absolutely nothing.
Yeah, so I would just respond that I think this would provide an incentive to form a JPA and take on the question of regional habitat conservation planning.
For whom? If we don't have an, I mean,
if there is a benefit to a regional solution to habitat conservation and management, as is the option on the table here, then forming that JPA is the vehicle to do that. This agency doesn't have the bandwidth or the time left, in my opinion, to get there.
Director Garfield, and then Director Oglesby, and then Morton.
Okay, so I'm very interested in making sure that the widest array of options and flexibility are created by any action we take. And so what I'm hearing is that if we take an action to certify the EIR, it's done. We can check it off the list. But it's not that simple. We're really voting to commit $200,000 and a lot of staff time to getting to the point over some objections we're hearing about the validity of the EIR. If we don't certify it, I'm not saying we say no, I'm just saying we don't say anything, we just leave this on the table in some way, then July 1, it's in hibernation. It can be reactivated, edited, new studies, and used by a hypothetical JPA or by one or two jurisdictions who may wish to take it forward. So it's not totally dependent on a JPA. It's whoever pulls it together. A JPA could be two entities. And that could then give time to more clearly match an HCP thing to this EIR so there's less dissonance that creates problems. So while I do want us to check our checks and get things done so that we're setting a good groundwork, I see some value in not acting at this point to keep it alive for whatever purpose would best serve those involved post-July. That's just what it sounds like.
Director Morton, and then Director Oglesby.
Ms. Garfield, I think you articulated some things very clearly for all of us. Thank you. From the perspective of the City of Marina, the intention of a certified EIR was for a base-wide permit. We were looking to get a habitat conservation plan with base-wide permitting that alleviated obligations from all the jurisdictions, and those are to come from the state and the federal agencies. So the certified EIR for the project of a habitat conservation plan makes all kinds of sense. Currently, what we're hearing at our Friday morning meeting, where these agencies are in attendance on the phone participating, is that they're not willing to give us a base-wide permit based on this EIR and our current HCP plan. So the usefulness of this becomes, in its current form, becomes that doesn't get, the usefulness doesn't outweigh what it's going to cost into the director's limitation about how much time we have and what our resources are to keep putting at this. So if in fact the Habitat Working Group decides, any of the entities decide to do an HCP in some modified form, that can be decided. That's not off the table, but that's just the expenditure not happening here. The risk of being included in any litigation, FORA, of course, would not be named because it's gone, and LAFCO is standing in the shoes of FORA would not be named because FORA didn't take action. So there are, I think those risks outweigh approving this. And then, I know the CFD fees can only be used for certain things, but we have a lot of projects, and we just discussed, to Helen's point, we're at the mid-year budget that we're looking at. We want to be sure we have adequate funds for the projects that just got identified: South Boundary Road, General Jim Moore, Eucalyptus, the Stockade. CFD funds are limited in their scope. We have limited building removal funds that we're trying to decide what those go. And we have even more limited just our general funds that we're hearing so many requests that might be more beneficially used. The veterans are coming asking for something. There are so many interests in this community that not spending this money may be prudent.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. The most prudent thing to do is to spend the money, right? We were here last time we met. The majority said move this thing forward. So I understand the people that voted against it last time have an opportunity to change minds and particularly stay firm where they're at. But that doesn't change the facts. Doesn't change the facts. And again, leading with, well, it's a possibility that we may be sued, when I believe the attorney we asked, H&K, we asked them to evaluate this, and they said this is a good alternative to certify the EIR. And we had advice from our attorney saying that if someone challenged the EIR, it probably wouldn't go that far at all. Wouldn't probably cost anything. So personally, I just think we just need to be intellectually honest and keep the facts moving forward. And if we're not prepared to fully fund a position for the liaison to the county for the veterans, then we shouldn't say there's money there for that, right? It's not a lot of money left in FORA. But 2 weeks ago, we had our consultants tell us it's more than enough bandwidth to finish this, and the money is there to finish it. And 8 days later, I don't understand how just because 4 or 6 people, the minority, voted against it, opinions changed. And my last comment is for people to talk about just kick this down the road to there's no JPA. No agreement is agreed to, it's all agreed to. And we're having problems agreeing to anything. So I'm just telling the community that, when people talk about the JPA, that's not really going forward. So when we say kick to the JPA, you're saying, well, the JPA is not there. But what happens is each one of the jurisdictions will then have to go out and do an ER for themselves and then be sued individually. Well, if they want to develop something, be sued individually, and then that's where the costs come in. So for me to say, don't spend this, just kick it down the curve, and after June 1st, when the city of Seaside decides to do something, let us be sued as individuals, and I know no one else but me, John, and Supervisor Parker care, and the rest of you guys care about us being sued as individual jurisdiction. I'm just saying, why should all the land use jurisdictions be sued one by one when they go forward when FORA was supposed to do it? That's the whole reason why FORA is taking over that regional role. And I think any project that may come underneath that is going to have to be a smaller footprint. But when that project comes forward, then that's an individual jurisdictional thing. But to say the EIR should not go forward because it may be sued on its face, and it's so then it doesn't have no value because we don't have a project attached to it, then I think that's fine. But some of our jurisdictions, I guess all of our jurisdictions, paid that money for the EIR over the last several years. I think last time we said it was like $3 million. That was an investment that each jurisdiction and the taxing entities made in this process. So, and I heard it was somebody, I'm almost finished here. It was somebody that said, I call his name out, Michael DeLapa, said, don't throw good money after bad, right? And I get that. But that's tax dollars we spent. And to say there's no value in finishing the EIR, if that allows each individual entity, jurisdictions, not to be sued easily right out the gate, then $200,000 is a reasonable sum to allay those fears from the jurisdictions, right? I don't think you save that and then just put all the jurisdictions out on their own on July 1st. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Director Gagliotti, and then I think we might want to hear from the public as well. We can bring it back for our own discussion.
I'd like to just get some qualification around kind of what the staff, the director said that, that staff would be overtaxed and that we may not have the time to do that. I mean, I'd like to hear that from DEA themselves and let us. All right.
Aaron, do you want to?
As I stated last week, and Director Oglesby has mentioned as well, it's only been a week. We have all the comment letters cataloged and comments assigned, ready to go. We wanted to make it through today before really unleashing the forces. But we do have the bandwidth to complete a final EIR before June 30th. That's as a consulting firm. I mean, there are some things in the world that are out of our control, of course, but we have the bandwidth to get it done. And that's good. Okay.
Thank you. I think I will open it up if there's any member of the public who wants to comment on this item. This is now your opportunity.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Kate McKenna, Executive Officer with the Local Agency Formation Commission of Monterey County. LAFCO, as you know, has been working with FORA to support your efforts in dissolving this agency. And we do expect that our commission will be holding a final hearing in April or May to take an action that documents that the process has been completed in an orderly fashion. Today, I'm here on behalf of our commission. The commission and its council have considered this second vote that you will be taking today. And from the perspective of LAFCO, we recommend that you do not take that action to proceed with funding the remaining tasks required to complete and certify the EIR. Primary reasons for that are that first, this action is not necessary and critical for FORA's dissolution. Second, that a certified EIR may not be realistically completed by June 30th, and or that it may be rushed during the completion process. There is also very much the potential that an alternative that may need to be generated as part of that work, just that it adds to the element of potentially rushing to completion. Given those concerns, given the volume of public comments that have been received on the draft EIR, we do believe that this certification process could result in a very high-risk litigation problem for our local agency formation commission. We do expect to be standing here acting on FORA's behalf on July 1st, 2020, and we see this as a very high-risk item that we're simply not funded to be able to be there and provide full defense. So that completes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the public wishing to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Dino Pic, City Manager, City of Delray Oaks. With respect to my colleague at LAFCO, I think what we just heard from the person that's actually going to execute the work is that it can be done in the time remaining. We know, at least tentatively from FORA's finance officer, that there are funds available to complete the work. And we have heard from outside counsel as well as others that the threat of litigation is very low. And so for those reasons, I would strongly urge the board to not take counsel of its fears, but rather take counsel of the purpose that it has before it, which is to complete critical objectives before it sunsets in a short time, one of which is certifying the environmental impact report for a regional habitat conservation plan, which can then be used by a JPA that may be 2 jurisdictions or more that can be built upon. It's important work. It's vital for my small jurisdiction, and I know it's important to other jurisdictions, and I urge the board to take the second vote to move this forward. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. Sherry Damon, City of Seaside. I also would urge you to move forward with the second vote for several reasons, some of which were articulated by Mr. Pic. But in terms of the workload that FORA staff would have to do, FORA staff is not going to be completing this work. The bulk of this work is going to be completed by Denise Duffy. There's a contract. They are going to be doing the bulk of that work. Yes, there will be a staff report and some work to bring that document back to the board for certification, and that's some work, but that is going to happen anyway. Something's going to come back to this board with respect to the habitat, whether that's a JPA, formation of JPA, or the results of the habitat working group. Also, just a reminder, you are not taking action to certify any project or approve any project today. You're just authorizing the background documents that allow you to consider whether you approve a project, deny a project, change a project. So I heard some comments about flexibility. If you are looking to approve maximum flexibility, then you want to approve getting the EIR in a form that it can be most flexibly utilized, whether that is by a JPA approving a revised, some revised base-wide habitat conservation plan, or whether it's the City of Seaside or the City of Marina moving forward, or the City of Delray Oaks moving forward on an individual take permit to allow a widening of Imjid Road or completion of South Boundary Road or some other project out there. That is maximum flexibility. That is how you use an EIR that is already mostly prepared without reinventing and respending another $3 million to get to that same place individually. And then the last thing, I think it was already said, is the minimal litigation risks. I believe, my opinion is it's a fairly minimal litigation risk if you are not approving a project. So if you are certifying an EIR, remember CEQA lawsuits come from approval of projects, not from certification of the EIR. So with respect to my colleagues at LAFCO on the great litigation risk, I believe that it's a small litigation risk to get to the certification level and the preparation of the documents to certify. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item?
Lorna Moffett, thank you for a panel. It's my understanding that under EIR, when there's comments, that if those comments aren't answered, you are up for litigation. So, having said that, I was contemplating, just yesterday about the parallel of the coronavirus and what we're doing to the world. The coronavirus is suffocating us, and we are suffocating the planet. So there is karma, isn't there? And as we tear away at the fabric of species, we make ourselves threadbare and vulnerable to forces beyond our control. We have traded God for technology and money and development. So today, you have a chance to change that. There's endangered species found nowhere else on the planet awaiting your verdict. And $3 million already have been spent on a habitat conservation plan that really is a carnage plan. It's all pro-development, and it's talking about taking species, changing their environment for the sake of development. And so this is just another way that we go ahead and destroy our planet and take away more threads. And each time we do, we take more threads and make ourselves more vulnerable to these viruses and to these climate changes. So you're going to have to be very brave and say, okay, you've already spent $3 million on a habitat carnage plan. Now, why don't you just take that $200,000 and make a real habitat conservation plan, which insists that those species will be left alone, number one, and that buildings that are already on there, that's where you can develop. This whole area already looks like an industrial park. I mean, it's tragic. So I think that we're really going to have to change, and we have to change now. And you have to think on this vote, how are my children, when I go home tonight and I talk to them about this, are they going to be proud of me? Or are they going to say, yeah, Dad, Mom, just another development plan under a big fancy name? So having said that, I'd like to leave you with these words from Henry Benton. He was a botanist. And he said, we need perhaps a kinder and more mystical concept of nature. Remote from universal nature and living by complicated artifice, man views through his glass of knowledge the feather magnified, and therefore sees the whole image in great distortion. We pity them for having taken a form so beneath our own, and we patronize them for their incompleteness. And there we err and greatly err, for animals shall not be measured by man. In a world complete, they move finished and complete, living by senses we have long lost or never attained, hearing voices we shall never hear. They are not brethren, they are not underlings, they are other nations, caught like ourselves in the web of time and life, fellow prisoners in life's splendors and travails. I urge you, if you can, if every single one of you would say, the old EIR, throw it away, and with the $200,000, let's do a real habitat conservation plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item? All right, I'll close public comment and bring it back. Josh, did you want to respond to any of the comments? Yeah, just a moment. Well, if staff wants to respond to any of the comments.
Yeah, I would. I have two comments here. One is with regard to the feasibility of completion and with respect to my colleagues from Delray Oaks and Seaside and the good work of DD&A. While they may well have the capacity, and I believe they do, to complete the work, they are not the only entity involved in the completion and certification pathway. In fact, in our review of the past decade's work has shown that it's been the state and federal agencies that have been the major hurdles to getting this project to completion. So I think that's worth considering. And secondly, to the point of the spending an additional $3 million to complete this project, if the option of passing to a joint powers authority were pursued, that joint powers authority would benefit from the work that's already been compiled. The board could receive these documents as staff reports. They could be made available to the entities to begin work and refining, so it wouldn't be starting from zero. They would be able to move forward more efficiently. And I think, as I mentioned before, it would provide an incentive for this joint powers authority to form and do the work.
Thank you. Director Phillips.
You can certainly see the argument of just doing nothing and not moving forward on the EIR. And in some ways, that makes sense from avoiding any possible litigation, although I think the litigation is de minimis, or the potential litigation is de minimis. But, I mean, we spent all this time, and there's the ability that we have seen to delay and stop these things, but we spent all this time on doing it, and we're so close to getting it there, and I just don't think it's fair to some of the jurisdictions, Delray Oaks and Seaside in particular. I don't think it's fair to them not to have them provided with what they're going to need as they go forward, because they didn't get a jump start in getting development like some jurisdictions did. I think it's unfair to them, and they have been part of this, and they've been vested in this, and they're not getting anything out of it. So.
Thank you. Any other board comments before we vote? Yes, thank you. Ms. Reimers.
I would just like to say that I agree with the statements that have just been made by Mr. Phillips, and that we really do need to look at the broad picture and the broad jurisdictions here, and Carmel doesn't have any jurisdiction here, so what we come to do is, I think our responsibility is look at the greater good. What can we do for the greater, bigger picture? And I would like to be supportive of Delray Oaks and of Seaside and of Marina and all of them. I just think that we've heard from the two that would really like very much to continue and give them a basis for their future use of their properties.
Thank you. Mr. Matarazzo and then Mr. Oglesby.
I do see both sides of this argument. However, I've been a consultant before and I'll be a consultant again. And the longer you delay something, the longer you have memories fail. So DDA has the memory right now. It's much easier for them to work on it now. The comments are clear in their mind. How they're going to handle those comments are clear in their mind, and how they're going to respond to making the EIR more valuable with a reduced scale alternative, they're going to do. So I think that's important. The other is time. Again, time. The longer this is delayed, the longer there's a chance for another lawsuit that comes into case law, which happened about 5 years ago, had the HCP revised based on the case law, and the longer other species may come up that get listed that aren't in the HCP. So time is the enemy of this process. Thank you.
Go ahead.
I'll be quick, Chair. Just someone was talking about the benefits, and I was like, they said the benefits are unclear, and I'm asked myself the benefits to who is unclear, because some of the jurisdictions appreciate the benefits of certifying the CIR. My understanding is, well, I won't speak for the Habitat working group, but my understanding was that they thought pushing the EIR forward was okay. I'll just say it like that. I'm just going to speak for Seaside for about 30, 40 seconds. It's easy to sit back and say, build on blight first, do this first. But when you look at Seaside, we didn't get most of our land, and I haven't done the math. I need to get my city manager to do the math, right? But I believe Marina has a lot of land that was blighted. But Seaside has the majority of its land that it was given is land that has trees and bushes and grass on it, ergo species, right? CSUMB was given all kind of blight. They have more blight than they can use. I would like some of their blight. But all I have left, and one of our biggest developments, it may be listed like about 122 acres, our campus town, but because it has military buildings in between that's still there, the College of Law that's still there, and things like that, it's only really like 92 acres of development, right? But after that, all we have is grass and trees. That's been given to us in '91 for that purpose. That's what the ER helps us to do. Now, it doesn't afford us a project or anything like that, but it does save time, it does save the memories, and it does save us money from recreating the EIR for all the jurisdictions. We cannot help if we were given land that starts off with just trees and grass, but people have been making us apologize for that for, 20, 24 plus years. The first 5 years, people knew that. Everybody around this FORA table 25 years ago when they agreed to that, 20 years ago when they agreed to that, they knew that some people have more blight than others. And they knew some of that land should be built on. And that's all we're talking about. That's all the EIR does. And so if there's I think the FORA board also spoke to, if we thought there was some chance, a limited chance, possibility maybe of some type of litigation post-FORA, what do we think that cost would be? And I thought we talked about, providing something from the Finance Committee. And I support that, I'm open to that, and we should find funds for that. So I want to make sure I support what LAFCO is talking about in that sense. I think Denise Duffy and them said that, yeah, they can't control the state and the federal, and we know they may go slow or fast. But again, I don't know what the day it was. Last time we met, 8 days ago, we heard the same arguments, and the consultant said they can meet the timeline. Staff said the money was there. I'm just wondering what changed. Nothing has changed. It's just talking points have changed. So I support us moving forward for the same reasons I supported last time we voted. I'm trying to make sure the citizens of Seaside, the taxpayers of Seaside, that money should be well spent. All right, thank you. Thank the chair.
Director Garfield and then Director Morton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, lots of issues here to juggle. And I would concur with Director Reimers on Pacific Grove's and Carmel's role is to try to find solutions that work the best for the most people. And I'm hearing very strongly from those affected that the benefits of continuing with this outweigh the risks. And I appreciate the comments that we've heard on that. I think there are some benefits to waiting, but it's a question of which is the greater security in completing the things that I think are central to the mission of what this regional body is supposed to be doing. So thank you for the time to speak on that.
In the last month, so initially when we all met in our Friday morning Habitat Working Group, there was a consensus to certify the EIR. And at that point, our consultants and Mr. Willoughby, who's reporting from his expertise and a CEQA attorney, is saying, yes, go ahead. And what's changed in the last 30 days is I've heard from the consultants and from Mr. Willoughby in these Friday morning meetings and today that the benefits don't outweigh the risks, that the document is not as useful as we initially were all anticipating. So that's what's changed, and that's where I'm saying if you have limited financial resources and that's not the beneficial place to spend the money. That's what we've been told by consultants as recently as today and last Friday. So that's the change.
Any other board members wanting to comment before we take our second vote? Yes, Director Wizard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the Board of Directors was interested in allocating a portion of money for the de minimis legal exposure, litigation exposure, would it be the direction? Would it be best received to do that during the mid-year budget review, or should that be a separate business item? What if we decide to go forward with the vote in the affirmative in this next couple of minutes? What would be the best way to facilitate that?
I think that would probably go through the Finance Committee and then come back to the board, probably at the mid-year budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd actually like to have some of the items that you brought up, Josh. I'd really like to understand kind of what it is that are going to be the gotchas for staff. I mean, again, if we could have DDA stand up and tell us what you know.
That's great. Yeah.
Erin Harwing from Denise Duffy and Associates again. It's nice to see such a robust discussion on a second vote. I did want to clarify a couple of things because it's hard for me to think about you having a second vote with some maybe misinformation floating around. One of the first things I wanted to address was that while the resource agencies might have been holding up certain aspects of the CEQA-NEPA document and the permitting over time, please know that this is FORA as a lead agency. This is your document, your certification, your decision to carry forward. It's separate from the NEPA process. The feds don't necessarily need to approve of what we're doing in the EIR. Their final EIS is going to be different. So just know that that's on pause. CDFW provided a comment letter on our document that we're addressing. They were anticipating responding to their needs by responding to their comment letter. So there's not going to be a significant amount of effort, and I don't think that the final EIR process would be significantly waylaid by any delay in response or something. So I wanted to put that out there because it has been an issue over the years. I did also want to let you know in response to Director Oglesby's comment that while there's de minimis, I just touched my face. I'm really trying not to. There's a little hair. Director Oglesby made a comment about the litigation, that FORA being able to take that on with the final certification, and so, and as Director Phillips responded to, so if, and as Sherry Damon mentioned, I think it should be very clear that what you're deciding on today is not certifying an EIR, it's finalizing, completing the CEQA document to make a decision on whether to certify an EIR at a later date. So it's very important that we're not being pre-decisional. And with that, if the board decides to certify the EIR and not approve the project, there's very low legal risk. What I wanted to relay to you, and I'm forever the optimist, right? Been doing this for a while, and what I saw at last week's Habitat Working Group, I don't want to touch it, I'll turn it off. Thank you. What I saw at last week's Habitat Working Group meeting was Director Morton ending it with, oh, so we're continuing all these 3 items to the next meeting. And haven't we been saying that for so long? So I wanted to let you all think in the perspective of, again, what if there is no JPA? What if there isn't a revised HCP? Does this EIR have any value for you? I wanted to point out that it does. I'm not advocating for this document. The world will not end if we don't certify this EIR. But I want you to be aware of the benefits of future CEQA streamlining options that you might have moving forward. They could be, and these streamlining actions are all based on or dependent on what those future actions are. They could be low intensity development associated with adoption and implementation of the FORA plan, the Forward Recreational Habitat Management Area Trail Plan. The impacts of those, the impacts of the trail maintenance, for example, under the FORA plan, have been analyzed at a project level in that EIR. The county could tier from that. They could do an initial study. They could do an addendum. So there are cost savings in the future depending on, cost and time savings in the future depending on what those future actions are. I mean, there are a plethora of future actions to be seen. So for another example, if the city of Marina and or county of Monterey and other land recipients that have habitat responsibilities under the HMP, if you move forward with preparing your resource management plan and that adoption and implementation turned out to be a CEQA action, again, those activities are analyzed at a project level in that EIR. You would have minimal amount of work to do to get to a final destination for those actions. And Josh asked me today, you know, what I just touched my face again. What developments are waiting? I mean, we've had a lot of developments waiting for these permits for a long time. And what's interesting, again, Director Oglesby, well, I wish for blight. Well, do you know who's had the most individual permits in blighted areas? It's City of Marina and County of Monterey, and they're blighted East Garrison and they're blighted residential areas. These species are everywhere. You're going to encounter them in the future. You're going to want something in the future to be done. Whether you go individually, whether you go 2 at a time, whether you go all together again, just keeping that option open. I was going to say one more thing. Shoot. I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Let's see, so where were we? Director Cagliotti, Director Morton.
Aaron, I just had some questions. So this EIR, finishing the process of the EIR, is unrelated to the EIS, and the EIS is what's necessary for the base-wide take permit from the federal government?
Yes.
Okay, so we're not going to get that even completing this? The
Not
federal
at this
take-
time.
Okay, that's what I'm, then you use the example, use an example for many jurisdictions about that it would be minimal action. So if we concluded the EIR certified it, then what you're saying is the city of Marina, the county, Delray Oaks, anybody, could use this as a start. They would use the studies in your EIR as by project, if that's the project. And they would then start with that, rely on it, and then you do supplemental studies or supplemental work for their project.
Correct.
So then they would issue a new EIR for their project.
Yes, and so you reminded me of what I was going to say to Director Oglesby, is that while we wouldn't have litigation risk at this point by not approving the project, anyone making findings on any project on former FORA from this point on in the future is subject to any litigation risk. But I think that by having a more complete administrative record about how this process has moved forward is beneficial. And under CEQA, again, it's legal risk is a little bit different than what I'm trying to point out are the benefits of this CEQA Act, or CEQA, and being able to rely on previous documents and reduce the level of effort in future actions. And anyone can pick up this document to see if it addresses a potential impact of a project, an action, like I said, the HMP activities, if those are included, you could tear off or streamline future actions. I wanted to point one more thing. I've been holding a lot in for a long time. You mentioned a while back, or someone mentioned about the reuse plan EIR and why not tear from that. One of the things that was painstakingly done over the last 2 years was to update all of the existing conditions from the base reuse plan EIR. So the 1997 conditions are now at a 2017 level. So that is really beneficial to not be able to rely on a base-wide document that's a little outdated. So I wanted to let you guys know that that is a benefit.
So the question that I have is if we certify the EIR, the city of Marina, the county, et cetera, would say, okay, here's a study on the area where our project's going to be. We supplement the studies. We do a new EIR conditioned with approval on our project. So now the fact that we, as a city, have relied on this EIR, are we opening ourselves up to litigation because we've relied on the underlying certified EIR from FORA, added our layer, and now we're being challenged because we've accepted and relied on a document that has never been previously tested, and it's only after it's tested that it's reliable?
I hear where you're going. There's a lot of layers. And you're talking to a true CEQA nerd. So I can tell you that if you have a future project and you want to incorporate, you don't have to incorporate the whole EIR. You can incorporate certain sections. Just say, hey, see, this was done over here on page da-da-da. I'm incorporating by reference. That impact has been analyzed. When you make a finding, a decision on the document, when City Council votes on that, that's what's open to litigation. It's rare to see, and I'm putting an attorney hat on that I don't deserve. when you rely on a previous document, you don't open up the whole document and that whole certification. That certification stays valid until the court finds it at a certain time. And that statute will have probably well past 180 days.
But the 180 days, as Mr. Willoughby explained to us last Friday and the Friday before, and if it's incorrect understanding, is the 180 days doesn't start running until there's a project approval.
Not true. So if you don't file an NOD, so if you don't file a notice of determination within 5 days of project approval, then the clock starts for 180 days. If you file it, it's 30 days. But you're not going to file one because you're not going to approve a project. You're going to certify an EIR so that you're never triggering that clock. But if someone wanted to come back, again, that's the de minimis situation we're talking about. If they were going to take an action, they'd want to do it within that 180 days because that would be part of their argument of the legal case.
Okay, maybe I misunderstood. If we certify the EIR in 2020, 2024, Seaside, Marina, the county approves the project, relies on it, does the 180 days start from when that project's approved, or does it start the 180 days, the window opens the date this board certifies the EIR, and the 180 days elapses and it's over?
The litigation clock starts the day you file your NOD on your action that you're doing. If your action is to prove, I'm trying to think of a project and it's failing me, the expansion of the airport runway, and you're relying on some biological analysis in the EIR that you certified in May of 2020. That legal action, that legal complaint would have to be filed within 30 days of filing that NOD on your decision, not on the previous decision of the certification of the HCP EIR.
Okay, so the 30 days would run from, in my example, 2024 when a city or an entity jurisdiction took action.
Right.
And they could challenge this EIR that was certified.
Yes, and so unfortunately, against what Director Oglesby said, FORA is not taking one for the team necessarily. That all of you, when you do your future actions, are all subject to CEQA and litigation. So you're all, if you go individually to do your ITPs, your permits, then you're individually up against litigation. If you go as a group in the future, you're up against litigation. Anything, in my opinion, on the former Fort Ord is litigious. So.
And I just have one last question. If we could rely on the studies related to our project area in a certified EIR, again, the jurisdiction would have to supplement that and do its own EIR compliance, its own CEQA compliance. My question is, would Marina be allowed to use a study from a non-certified FORA EIR to take the study to our airport expansion, for example? Use the base study that your agency has prepared, included in this EIR, now not certified, and then our city having to do the additional work would just build on that for our project CEQA compliance and project approval.
I got a little lost on that one.
So can we still use your studies even if it's not certified?
Sure, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Director Oglesby, are you going to touch your face?
Now, Aaron, I have about 3 quick questions for you. No, I laugh and I kid, but I don't joke.
Okay.
So, what I want to get to, because I think us going around, and this is a very serious subject, right? So it's the second vote, so it doesn't necessarily have to go that fast. But what we got to is people start asking you questions, and then for me, I came away with more benefits of going forward. That's what I came away with. So that's what's on the record now. It's better for the jurisdictions to move this forward than it was 10 minutes ago without your information. What I don't know if I catch you off guard, but people are talking about building on the certification of EIR, and I know, each jurisdiction has to do more, and then they're subject to litigations. I said that from the start, but if you say build on the EIR, that means the EIR has a value. And what is the value of that work if the jurisdictions had to do it all over again? Is it $20,000 worth of work, or $70,000 worth of work, or is it 8 months? My point is it's people are trying to poo-poo it as though, well, you have to add to it anyway, so there's no value, so why finish this up? But if each one of us had to go and recreate that work, and I think Director, Morton, acknowledge that either way we can use some of your work, but are you saying it's more of a value if the work is certified? That's what I want to get to. We can use it either way, but what is the value? And if you could put money on it, then maybe people are saying it's not worth $200,000, but if each jurisdiction had to recreate that certification stepstone, and each one of us had to spend $75,000 and what is it, staff time and 10 months worth of work, and that's a value to us in the future. So I'm just trying to establish that it may be worth the $200,000 if we don't have to recreate that work anytime we may want to do it in 2024.
That's a great question, and Director Morton is correct. You can take any study from anywhere and put it in your CEQA document. You have to stand up and show substantial evidence in the court of law that that's accurate information. What is different about using a certified EIR is that you're able to tier from it. So let me give you a complex but good example because I think it's relevant. State Parks isn't here today, but I'm sure you've seen in the paper that they want to construct their campground. If you certified this EIR, they could begin to move forward with their permitting process to get that, to get their own permits. So again, a complex, but let's say there's no JPA, everyone goes their own way. State Parks could take that EIR and say, hey, Fish and Wildlife Service, the feds, let's do an environmental assessment to finish up and give us our permit so we can build our campground. What CEQA and NEPA allow you to do is if there's a certified document, a high-level one like an EIR or EIS, you can do lower-tiered documents that reduce time and cost in the future. But if it's not certified, you have to do an EIR or an EIS in the future, which is why I've been a little bit hesitant that if there's no JPA, or if there's a JPA and you revise the HCP and go out and you revise the EIR, EIS, it's so complicated. Cost-wise, there's cost savings that if your future action falls within the certified EIR, you can do a lower level document, which will reduce time and cost. Now, I can't tell you whether it's oodles of money or just pennies, but because that depends on your action. For example, I don't know who I was telling, but again, with the habitat management plans, or for the habitat management plan implementation, and you do a resource management plan, you could do a straight up addendum and approve it at a city council meeting within a month and get online and do your habitat management responsibilities. You don't have to do an EIR, you wouldn't have to do initial study. That's the type of benefit that you could have moving forward from a certified EIR versus just using any study in the world.
Director Gagliotti.
Yeah, I'd like to call for the vote, if you could.
All right, so, well, we'll just say that you're saying that you're ready for us to move to the vote. Any further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and this is the second vote. Do we think it's a good idea to take it as a roll call vote? Okay, let's have a roll call vote, please. Yes, do we have it? Do we have the motion up there?
So just to be clear, the last time the vote was item C that's shown up there, which is prepare and certify the EIR with revised project alternatives based on phase development and do not adopt the HCP. That's what was approved at the first vote, and that's what a yes vote here would be supporting. And that would provide staff direction to extend the contract with DDA and ICF to support the completion work. Okay.
Director Oglesby?
I got a point over to the chair. Is that the legal understanding from our attorney? Because, I don't want us to come back and say and I know Josh is not trying to do that, but it's just, okay. Did you call me?
Director Oglesby?
Aye.
Director Parker?
No.
Director Adams? Director Phillips?
Aye.
Director O'Connell?
No.
Director Hoppe? Director Wizard?
Aye.
Director Gunter? Director Ramers?
Yes.
Director Gagliotti?
Yes.
Director Morton? Director Carbone?
Yes.
Director Garfield?
Aye.
Seven to three?
7-4.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Motion passes. Good discussion. Yes, Mr. Metz.
Yeah, so I just want to take a moment to comment. I do appreciate the discussion, and I do appreciate the opportunity to provide my opinion when I was asked, and I just want you all to know as a board that with speaking as one voice and me leading the staff and consultant effort, we will make sure that this keeps moving and get it done before June. So, thank you.
Thank you. Great. We'll move now to 8B, Transition Plan Proposed Amendments. Looks like Ms. Flint is ready for action.
I'm ready for action. Hopefully this will be shorter. We reviewed the 2018 transition plan. You may remember that you approved this in 2018 at a special board meeting in December. And the reason we did that, it actually came out of some discussions from the Habitat Working Group when we were looking at language that was in there that related directly to the 17 million, the establishment of a JPA potentially, and some other issues. So we identified actually 9 areas within the plan that since that plan was adopted, board has moved in a different direction, and there are some things we felt that you'd want to take a look at and consider updating. So I'm going to go through all of those with one exception, which would be the section that relates to the Habitat Working Group, JPA potential, which we're going to be discussing tomorrow with the Habitat Working Group, which is looking at the possible distributions of funds from that remaining CFD. And once they come back with a recommendation, we will bring that information back to you at your next board meeting. So the first section, I think this is in your board package, section 1.3, which relates to revenue sharing and financial contributions. And specifically, the current plan requires that each entity pay its fair share for the cost of the FORA program. However, post June 30th, 2020, there is no FORA program, so the staff recommendation is to strike this section from the transition plan as it would not be happening. The second change relates to the reuse plan and master resolution. And this is also something that LAFCO has been looking at and asking about in general. So in the current plan, it basically says that the cities of Seaside, Marina, Monterey, Delray Oaks, and the county would adopt the master resolution. In other words, you guys would have said, we are going to continue with all the things that are FORA, past FORA. None of the jurisdictions have adopted that master resolution. And in this particular section, it also talks about FORA posting it for the future. And in conversations with legal counsel, we believe that this master resolution was already part of the record when it was creating FORA and then subsequent amendments. So we're also recommending that this be removed. A very important component of that master resolution is that it did include the requirements for prevailing wage and various other land use oversight elements that, again, are no longer enforceable once FORA sunsets in June 30th. The next section goes to habitat funding, and in this section, it basically specifies a community facilities district tax that all the agencies would be implementing. And I know from working with many of you, everyone has a different path to this. Some may do CFDs, some may do impact fees, some may find another funding mechanism, but it's not within FORA's purview to dictate to any jurisdiction what that replacement funding might look like. So this is another section that staff is recommending that it be removed. LAFCO's section, this is 2.1.3, and this is updated. At the time that the plan was written, it estimated a sum of about $300,000 that would go to LAFCO. As the board is aware, you have allocated $500,000, which has been paid to LAFCO, and we're adding language in there that basically says that the terms and conditions for these funds are provided in the FORA LAFCO agreement, which was executed in December of 2019. And what that basically means is they can use these funds for indemnification against legal. Specifically, if there were some legal that we were just talking about in our previous discussion, these funds could be utilized for that purpose. And if they are not needed, then there's a mechanism in that agreement that puts them back out to the other jurisdictions. CIP funds, this is an updated piece. This is 2.1.5. And the additional piece in here is that basically talking about the capital improvement funds will be transferred to the jurisdiction assigned, just as we were talking about previously with, for example, Delray Oaks, Marina, and Seaside with their projects. And the only addition here is provided there is a fully executed memorandum of agreement regarding the project between the jurisdiction and FORA. And that's basically an insurement that if the funds or when the funds are given to Delray Oaks, that they're going to use them for their specified project and likewise for the other two agencies that are there. 2.1.9, this basically, now that we know that Seaside has been named as the successor, this updates that information. Previously, this was an unknown, and so the language in the 2018 plan is, of course, now out of date. Section 2.2.6, a subject of quite a bit of discussion at the admin committee. The transition plan had listed 19 transportation and other projects that it envisioned at that time transferring specifically to the agencies. But at this point, the way that the agencies have decided is everyone is taking care of their own roads, their own projects, and there is no plan to enforce that or any ability to do that either through this or the implementing agreement. So the suggestion here is also to remove that section. And then the final change suggested today is regarding the transition plan implementing agreements. Previously, there were a lot of things that were tied into this. You can see the very small type that you probably can't read from back there, but it is in your package. The suggestion is to update this section to basically just say, in order to clarify roles and responsibilities, the board requests that each affected entity and or land use holding member enter into a transition plan implementing agreement. We are continuing to have meetings on this particular topic. In fact, we met just last Wednesday regarding water, and there are a few other things to lay out. But currently, in their current form, the transition plan basically serves as a document that rescinds the previous implementing agreements that were between FORA and the agencies and basically releases them from some of the obligations that were considered in previous iterations. So basically, it's a simplification on all of these items that basically reaffirm that once FORA has sunsetted, that each agency will have its own land use, its own ability to determine what kind of funds it was going to raise, et cetera, et cetera. The only other place, this is not a change, but I did want to call it to your attention, because we will be talking about this later. There was some question on the Finance Committee and others that with regard to the CalPERS liability, FORA has been setting aside funds to pay that debt in full. We will not know from CalPERS until potentially after sunset what that total amount will be. But if there is a gap of however much, the transition plan already includes language that's been approved that basically says that the county has the ability to sequester property tax funds aside from the bond that would be used to pay those funds back over time, and actually it specifies a 5-year time. The question that has come up recently is there's another section in the TPIA that relates to undisclosed debt, something that may come up after FORA's sunset, or debts that FORA may not be able to pay prior to sunset. And the question is if the board wanted to have a future discussion about how that might be handled, whether that's for future litigation costs or for other items. So we'll be bringing that back along with a discussion. Before that happens, however, FORA Legal Counsel will be having a several conversations with legal counsels throughout the member agencies to talk that through and what that might look like. So that will be coming back. So basically, it's those 8 options for your consideration today. We're looking for a board approval or direction to update the plan, and then at subsequent meetings, we'll give you those other 2 sections. So essentially, we'll have a 2020 transition plan that would then be presented to LAFCO so that they could be able to see how we're proceeding with the transition to sunset. And so that's basically it, and I'm available, of course, to answer any questions that you might have.
Questions from board members for Ms. Flint? Yes, Director Morton.
I had a couple of questions. So I think right in the beginning, you took out that the implementation agreements are null and void.
It's at that from the TPIA, the transition plan. It's so all these implementing.
Not the TPIA, but the 2001.
So the implementing agreements, which are the ones for each jurisdiction, they're the very first line in that, and those are being considered at the admin and will go to the agencies, says that they will supersede the previous agreement. This agreement is the FORA as a whole transition plan that basically says this is what FORA as an agency will do marching towards sunset. And this document is what LAFCO is overlooking to make sure that that transition is smooth and orderly.
Okay, so my question is in paragraph 2.2.7, I'm going to your changes that you're now proposing, it's water, wastewater. The transition plan hereby assigns to MCWD FORA's rights of enforcement under the implementation agreements to the extent they survive dissolution regarding water allocations. So the implementation agreements used in that sentence means the earlier implementation agreements that are now superseded by the transition plan implementing agreements. I'm pointing this out. I'm not asking for answers. I'm looking for consistency throughout the entire document before we start just piecemealing change.
I'm looking, I don't believe in the staff report. Give me the section again, please, I'm sorry.
I'm looking at the actual document.
Okay, so if you would like us to consider that as a change, we can certainly explore that. That was not what we were proposing today. So
Okay.
Today we were just looking at these sections, but we're certainly going to be looking at others, and if you'd like us to give direction to go and dive in on that section as well, absolutely happy to do it.
So then my second question is in paragraph 2.2.8, where it indicates, this is to the transition plan, it's not in your report.
Yep. Okay.
But it's, when you're asking, from my perspective, when you're asking us to change written paragraphs in a document, it's important to see how all the paragraphs interrelate.
Sure.
And so 2.2.8, I just had a question, is that the compilation of contracts and documents, commitments relevant to the FORA program, dissolution of FORA, these were going to be updated every month to all of us.
That will be coming in your very next presentation because we've gone through all 118 of them. And we have a master list of each one, what its final disposition was, whether it was ended, concluded, no longer relevant, or redundant, replaced, whatever. So that'll be in the attachment, yes.
Okay, so we'll be getting that.
Yes.
And that may direct modification of other paragraphs.
Correct.
Okay, and then in paragraph 2.2.9, late discovered items, and it indicates to the extent any contractual obligations discovered by LAFCO review that we're to be notified. My question is, have we been notified by LAFCO of something we haven't addressed?
And that was that specific paragraph is the one I was talking about previously, that section may need to be revised based on requests from members to potentially set aside funds that may or may not be available in the now. In other words, in speaking with the legal team, it's as if you want to spend $500,000 that you do not have at this time, but if you incur that debt prior to sunset, would that debt be recognized as something that could be satisfied by the counties requesting those funds be held? So we have not gotten complete clarification on that yet, so it would be sectioned off. And I think to your point, the idea here is because we have so many of these sections, and we're finding, at least with admin, that some have more conversation than others. We're not asking for approval of the 2020 transition plan, but rather comment, feedback, and concurrence that these changes in these sections would be amenable to the board, and then we would, once we finish everything, there'd be a final action to take them all at the same time as a 2020 plan.
So by accepting these paragraphs, we're not accepting the agreement as is with just these deleted provisions?
No, just,
Thank you.
just these sections.
Thank you. Any other board member questions for Ms. Flint? Any public comment on this item?
Ron Cheshire speaking on behalf of the Monterey Santa Cruz Building Trades Council. 1.4, the master resolution needs to be recorded. We've spent 3 decades and millions of dollars coming up with a plan for the reuse of this base. And if you can't recognize that, if the individual jurisdictions cannot recognize their obligations, then this whole thing is going to go down the tubes, and you're going to open this whole deal up. You're going to open the gates of litigious hell to every attorney in the world, from developer sides to the other side, okay? The implementation agreements hold the jurisdictions to certain standards. Those standards are that they'll abide by the reuse plan and the master resolution, okay? Now, those have been recorded. Well, excuse me. You have deed restrictions and covenants saying such, but the master resolution was never recorded, and it needs to be recorded so it's codified, so they understand what it's all about. You can't leave this thing open-ended. We've worked too hard, too long, spent too much money getting to this point. I know that there are probably groups that want some flexibility. The plan allows for flexibility. If there's something that's been recorded that's no longer, that doesn't adhere to law, naturally you don't have to follow it. I'm sure that I've heard that maybe housing standards have changed, or this or that, or the governor's done this or the governor's done that. If it no longer applies through law, if it's not legal, then you won't have to hold up to that standard. But we cannot, after all that we have done, allow for a situation to where you as jurisdictions don't recognize the obligations that you've already agreed to. And yeah, here it is. Oh, okay, the old implementation agreement's going to be null and void. That was right up front. It's going to be null and void. You're not going to have to even abide by anything. And those are my own words. You're leaving this too much open. We know LAFCO has a concern, and we'll go to LAFCO and ask them to basically put it in the plan. But you cannot do this. You need to record that master resolution, and the jurisdictions need to uphold everything that they have agreed to in the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item?
Hi, Kate McKenna once again from LAFCO, Monterey County. I wanted to express, first of all, my appreciation to your staff and consultant Kendall for the review, and your attorney team for the review that you're doing right now of that 2018 transition plan and the old documents to determine what is still enforceable, what needs to be cleaned up. So I appreciate the current review that's undergoing. I have, with respect to one of the items that Kendall indicated that she would be bringing back in the next month or two, I did want to comment on that. She referenced a new section of the 2020 version of the transition plan that will address payment of FORA debts in the post-FORA era. I would like to request that LAFCO's potential litigation costs and staff administration costs be included as one of those potential FORA debts. And I understand that our attorney will be speaking with Mr. Giffen and your team in developing that plan section language. Also, since I'm here, just given the litigation that is both existing, potential, and unknown at this time, I would like to continue to request, please, that as part of your mid-year budget review, that you consider additional funding for LAFCO for that purpose. And of course, any funds that are earmarked for LAFCO would be returned to the County of Monterey and the underlying or the other land use jurisdictions in the future if they're not needed. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Warren Poitras. I'm known as Pete. I'm on the board of the Monterey County Regional Fire District and a LAFCO commissioner representing special districts. And I want to add to our executive director's mentioning the additional money that we would like to ask from FORA for LAFCO for potential litigation costs, which are sure to come. Litigation, a huge word. I lost count how many times that word's been mentioned today, and how many times it's on your closed session. 3 of them, litigation. All of that's going to wind up in LAFCO's lap. And we're going to need as much money as we can. I represent special districts, of which there are 40 in this county. And most of them have no dog in any of the fights that go on with regard to FORA. And they're going to be asked ultimately if we run into extreme litigation costs, which I think is much more likely than not. We're going to have to increase our member fees in order to get some money to pay for litigation costs. You're in a position, if you so choose, to increase the amount. We appreciate the $500,000, but I think all the lawyers in this room certainly know that ain't much when it comes to litigation. And I think if we doubled that or even tripled it, LAFCO would be a lot better off, and our special district members would be a lot better off, and we wouldn't have to go ask the citizens for more money. So I want you to consider that when you make these decisions. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, members of the board, Sherry Damon, City of Seaside. In reviewing the proposed changes, I would urge not doing them today. I've heard today that we are requesting more changes. I personally benefit from seeing the entire document altogether. I heard Ms. Morton talk about some changes. It's really hard to take and piecemeal. That would be my first observation. And the second observation I have is with respect to anything that changes habitat. You have a habitat working group that should be making recommendations back to you. And so, although I recognize that, this particular 1.5 deals with a potential assessment and maybe you can't do that, the fact of the matter is the habitat working group is making recommendations about habitat and different kinds of things. I think the board should consider as a piece of information making this type of a change. Third point is with respect to 2.1.5, where you're talking about changing any money, dollar things. It seems to me that should come forward at the same time as the mid-year budget. We just talked about an earlier item on South Boundary and Eucalyptus Road and the other things that are dovetailing together with the mid-year budget. When you're making changes in the transition plan that affect money, it seems that ought to come together with the mid-year budget and comprehensively. And finally, with respect to 2.1.9, just a note, Seaside and FORA have agreed to go forward on the local redevelopment authority, but that has not yet been approved by the federal government yet. So in terms of your thinking on what happens with property if there is no LRA designation by June 30th, 2020, I'd urge you to hold off moving too expeditiously, and not to forget that the FORA board is going to have to transfer. If the properties don't transfer before June 30th, 2020, there will have to be some kind of transfer to a successor LRA if Seaside is successful in getting that designation, or under some other rubric if there is no designation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, FORA. My name is Tony Elzel, and I'm a member of Carpenters Local 605. I am here today to express our union's opposition to the recommendation that the board should repeal its previous decision to permanently preserve the policies contained in the master resolution. With good reason. A little over a year ago, this board directed staff to record the master resolution in its entirety prior to FORA's sunset. California legislators created this authority to ensure the development of the former base lands benefited the entire Monterey Bay community. The master resolution helped concretize the legislation intent by creating obligations that ran with the land and any future development of the property, including commitments to build affordable housing, protect the environment, and that developers would pay their workers prevailing wages. One of the reasons FORA adopted the prevailing wage requirement was to provide opportunities for local workers and contractors. We believe there is no better way to invest in the region than to support local businesses and working families. As the board itself noted, recording the master resolution was not intended to create new obligations, but instead to make a clear record of ones that already existed. FORA staff has expressed the opinion that the board has no mechanism to enforce policies contained in the master resolution, and therefore it must instead cancel these policies. FORA does not need to enforce these policies, but merely clarify that the obligations in existing deed covenants will continue to run with the land. The carpenters are concerned that staff is urging the board to take this drastic step as a result of pressure from developers who are looking for any way to get around commitments attached to the use of Fort Ord land. This will not work, but it would have other unintended effects. As noted in a recent LAFCO staff report, failure to record the resolution is likely to result in more litigation that could delay or even halt the development of decommissioned land. This is in no one's best interest. I hope this board will consider this issue carefully and honor its own commitments as well as the intent of the state legislator by rejecting this staff recommendation. Thank you.
Any other public comment on this item? I don't see anyone coming forward, so we'll close public comment and bring it back to this board for action. Director Morton.
So with regard to the 1.4, the recordation of the master resolution, it appears in the language that now is on page 52 of the staff report that the intention is to take it out. The question that I have is the last paragraph therein that says if the jurisdictions didn't do something by December 30th, 2019, staff is directed to record the master resolution in its entirety, and it doesn't create anything new. My question was it the intention of this agreement that the master resolution, which might be 100 pages, I have no idea, but that just gets recorded as one document? Or was the intention of this paragraph that it is recorded with each deed? I can't tell what we thought we were doing from this.
Well, I'll let Kendall get into it, but also there's one now city attorney of Seaside that was instrumental in drafting this document, and she might be able to shed light on what that intention was.
And I will defer, but I just want to point out two things. The deeds that are from property that are transferred from FORA to the underlying jurisdictions, the requirements in those deeds are not affected by this. Basically, whatever's in the deeds stays in the deed, and those are requirements that are for federal in nature. The master resolution was something that came out of the state creation of FORA. And therefore, when FORA sunsets, there is no state requirement that carries over. And anything that's in the deeds stays in the deeds. But again, we've been talking with council, that was the reason. We looked at it and said, well, this is an area that cannot be enforced because there's no mechanism from LAFCO to enforce FORA's covenant. So we thought that that would be something that would be worthwhile to remove.
So that's exactly where I'm going, is that if in fact the land's already transferred and then went from FORA to the jurisdictions to whomever, is that unless it was in the deed at the time of transfer, recording the master resolution in 2020 is not going to amplify, change, modify what are the covenants that run with the land on things previously transferred.
Or future, because all of the land that is transferred, now when Seaside takes over and they transfer, there will be deeds that will go with that, and they have requirements as well. Again, those are federal because we're coming from the Army as opposed to state.
So the question that I have, if it was the intention to memorialize the master resolution by recordation, recordation is notice. It's notice to the world. It doesn't have any, as stated in here, there's no modification of any requirements, doesn't impose any obligations, it's just notice. What is the detriment to recording that document other than perhaps it's a $400, I don't know, $600 cost that has it in the county records as notice?
I would have to get further clarification. In talking with Mr. Willoughby and legal counsel, it appeared that it would serve no purpose, but if the board would like to have it recorded, we can certainly do that.
So when I'm looking at this paragraph, the reason I'm asking this is it says in here it's intended to preserve a permanent record of the policies contained in the master resolution, which would be a place that anybody in the world could go look at it. And by recording it, you're fulfilling your objective here. And what I've heard from two of the public speakers, there's just no expectation that it changes the legal impacts of deeds.
Yeah, I think that the discussion that we had was because it was already part of the FORA record in general, perhaps not recorded, but that it was out there, it had been in the public, that it was not necessary, but I don't think there's any harm, and I'll defer to John and David on that. I don't see that there's any harm in that, because again, there's nothing enforceable. And in terms of the intent in 2018 when the document was developed, I would have to defer to the board members that were there, or Ms. Damon, who was part of the folks that wrote that.
Okay, I think that we should consider whether we wanted to record it. The idea is it's public notice. The idea is that when Marina is going to do a project, Seaside, any member of the public would be able to locate that on the county recorder's office. They would come to our city council member meetings, et cetera, and say, we would like you to incorporate some of these items, all of these items. It's fairness about notice. And so recording it, I think, does create the record that we're all trying to create about what our intentions were in this organization.
Director Gagliotti and then Director Oglesby.
I appreciate the two speakers, and I appreciate what Director Morton just said. But I just ask in terms of cost and staff time. That was a whole part of the discussion in the last one. So is it onerous, or is it going to be something quite easy? Yeah.
De minimis.
Perfect.
Well, yeah. And is that my understanding? That's all they wanted was just to record it? And it doesn't do anything? It doesn't ensure anything? It doesn't have no teeth in it? So and I don't disagree. My point is that I'll try to get a better understanding of what we can put in this document, this transition document, as we move forward, and to separate that holds jurisdictions accountable about how they pay working people in this county. And that'll be up to you guys to vote up or down, but we're going to have that discussion. We're making all these changes, but we're leaving the working people out. And for as far as I'm concerned, it has to be more than just saying it's de minimis. It doesn't mean anything, so let's record it. No, I don't know. I'm not talking about any, but no, I'm not disagreeing with any of what you guys saying. I'm just going to give us the opportunity to have them put stuff in the document that they will want to see, just like other agencies are doing the same thing. That's it. I will work with them. I will bring something back, just like people are working with LAFCO, people are working with other jurisdictions and agencies, and, no big deal.
Yes, Director Carbone.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Yes, comment, I concur with Ms. Morton. And also, there is a time limit here that, in the sentence below, that it's supposed to be recorded 1 month prior to that dissolution.
Thank you. So this item is to review staff recommendations for proposed amendments to the 2018 transition plan and provide comments and direction for future revisions. We don't necessarily have to take action saying we approve these. I think this is, I actually appreciate the fact that we're bringing it bit by bit so that we're not completely overwhelmed when it all comes, but probably making a decision should all be done with the pieces in one place at one time. So I think staff has received direction. I don't think there are any concerns other than the ones expressed mostly on that master resolution issue. So if that's other people's understanding, I think we can consider this item received, discussed, and close it for the day. Yes, but Director O'Connell.
Based on previous decisions by the board, what's wrong with just recording the resolution before it comes back, this item comes back? I mean, it says not less than 1 month. Well, we've got 110 days, so why not just do it? I mean, what is it?
Okay, there's
$500?
So what?
Right. So there's a suggestion that we give direction to staff to go ahead and record the master resolution. Any objection to that
Yeah.
idea?
Yeah, I don't think it's before us. I think we ought to do it as a whole, just what they said, we do it all together. But I don't think that motion's before us.
Well, it was already before us, and it's been decided a long time ago. It's to be recorded sometime not less than 1 month before we dissolve. So it's just an act that hasn't been done.
Yes, that's the distinction.
I'd like to chair, through the chair.
Okay, yes,
I'd actually
Director
like to hear
Cagliari.
the attorney who actually wrote the, can, Sherry, did you have something?
No, I was just saying that, at point of order, I don't know that you could actually direct a recording to staff because it's not agendized that way. What's on your agenda is to consider changes to the transition plan, not to direct staff to do or not do something. But that being said, I can give you the answer. What I understood that language is similar to what Ms. Morton said, that it would be a one document. It's a notice document. And by the way, you're exempt from certain kinds of recording fees under Government Code 6103. Just being a little helpful, mark that down as saving for $400 or whatever.
So,
Yes,
Madam
Director.
Chair, just to make clear, and Director O'Connell just indicated, this was direction to staff from December 18, 2018. So we're not asking you to do anything today except fulfill what you were already directed to do.
Thank you.
I don't know how many other things they have not done that they should have done. But I don't disagree. My only point, Chair, is I'm still going to reserve the right to work with the unions to try to figure out language in our transition plan that holds us accountable to pay working people to build stuff on the former Fort Ord.
Okay. So do you have what you need, or you can, how do you envision handling this?
Going to go ahead and say yes.
All right.
We have what we need.
Excellent. Thank you. Good discussion. We will move now to public comment. Let's see, it is after 5 o'clock, so I would need a motion to continue perhaps for public comment. All right, motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. All right, we'll go forward with public comment then.
Ron Cheshire. I just want to reiterate in regards to the bond is that if it's eventually determined that the amount of money isn't sufficient to clear all the blight, we still want to approach Congressman Panetta in regards to getting some money from the federal government. What we had proposed to him is that if the government would go ahead and even just lend the money as the blight's cleared, the property's sold, we could even pay it back. Now, whoever pays the federal government back, okay? And I heard a plea from Marina yesterday. I understand that they're going to have a significant amount of blight that they still have to deal with after the money's divvied up. And in spite of past problems with the city of Marina, I agree that it would behoove all of us to have all the blight removed. So we would be happy to be a part of that and help lead the charge on it. Because you discussed it a little bit, I will let you know that in the 6th District Court of Appeals decision, which has been published, our lawsuit on prevailing wages in the area, the developer brought up the fact that the master resolution wasn't recorded. See, in the deeds and covenants, it talks about the reuse plan, the master resolution. It doesn't specifically say what's in it. And they tried to play ignorant of what was in there. By giving notice, no one can plead ignorance. And that's why it's so important to us. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, I don't see anyone coming forward. So that ends our meeting for today. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.